Hi, welcome to SBR Videos. I'm Peter Loshak. Today is Friday, February 12th, and right now we're going to do a very interesting video with a very special guest on college basketball. His name is Ed Feng. His website is thepowerrank.com. He is a very well-regarded quantitative analyst of college basketball, among other things, and I'm sure that many of our regular viewers are already familiar with him and his website, thepowerrank.com. We're going to discuss a very interesting topic today, three-point defensive numbers and what they mean going forward. Ed Feng, thanks for being with us. Your website is thepowerrank.com. Tell us a little bit about what you do there, just quickly for anyone who's not familiar with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. The Power Rank is all about better understanding sports through numbers. It all started when I realized I was a lot more interested in sports and making predictions than the scientific experiments that I was trying to analyze in my previous career. And I applied some of the research methods that I had done in my PhD on statistical physics, and strangely, that ended up being a perfect background to get into sports and ranking teams. And one of the things that's always fascinated people are the college basketball numbers, especially in America here, where everyone loves March Madness and tournaments, predictions, and things like that. And so that's how I got started.
All right, so needless to say, we're very interested to hear what Ed Feng can tell us about college basketball this season. And the topic of today is three-point defense, how much of it is due to randomness, how much of it is predictive, and what that can tell us about possible line value for upcoming games with teams that might have been lucky or unlucky with three-point defense. Ed Feng, the most notorious, I think, example of this is turnovers in football, right? But one of the main reasons that is such an important factor is because there's so few of them, right? And my assumption would be that there's enough three-point shot attempts, both offensively and defensively, that these numbers would roughly normalize. But is that not the case?
Yeah, I mean, you would think that you would eventually get to the average, and if we played a 1,000-game college basketball season, we would. But unfortunately, that's not the case. We're at about 20 games, 20-some games, and you still see a lot of deviations. And I talk about some of them in my article. We can talk about them right now. But three-point defense is one of those things that I look at as a measure of how unlucky or lucky a team might be. So essentially, the idea is if you're a really good two-point defensive team, you're probably going to be better than average defending the three-point line. Maybe there's some extreme examples where you have a big guy that's swatting all the shots and that's driving that two-point field goal defense. But in general, if you look at a team like Notre Dame that has some really good two-point defense, but is allowing almost 40% on opposing three-pointers, like 40%, that's an insane number. You're going to expect some regression from that 40%, and they're not going to allow 40% on three-pointers the remainder of the way. And that's the type of analysis that I talk about in the article.
All right, so what you're saying is that at this point in the season, three-point defensive numbers are not necessarily very predictive for every team. How does that compare with offensive numbers from the three-point line? Are they more predictive in general?
Yeah, so the basis of this analysis is you look at how three-point offense in early season correlates with three-point offense in later season. And you can do this for both offense and defense. And Ken Pomeroy kind of started this analysis, and he found there was no relationship for three-point shooting, either on offense or defense.
Either on offense or defense. So you would say that the luck factor involved with three-point defense is just as strong with various teams offensively as well.
Well, but see, there's a caveat here, right? Because clearly some people are better at shooting than others.
Right.
So if you're in a three-point shooting contest, you want Steph Curry, not Dwight Howard. But it just points to the analysis just says that there's a lot of randomness in that quantity. And so, on offense, I'm a little bit more hesitant about that because there is definitely more of a skill in shooting than I think in kind of defending the three. But I mean, there's a lot of randomness too. So, I didn't check these numbers because I didn't make it as part of my article. But if a team is really shooting 45% at this point in the season, you still expect that to regress a little bit. And if you really want to dig into that, maybe you look at the individual players, see how their season-long averages are doing compared to previous seasons, and you can get an idea about luck on three-point offense. It's certainly something that you can look into. I don't have a particular example because I think the three-point defense is a better thing to look at just because I feel like there is a little bit randomness probably plays a little bit more of a role on the defensive side of the court. And we also have this ability that, that 2-point field goal defense predicts the 3-point field goal defense at least a little bit. And with my numbers, I actually adjust that 2-point field goal defense for schedule, which is not something you get on KenPom. So I feel like I can say a little bit something more, and that's what I show in that article.
All right, and in your opinion, are there certain kinds of teams? Is the team makeup a factor in which teams you think are more or less likely to regress to a mean than others? Because of course, in college basketball, some teams play at a notoriously fast pace, some teams play at a notoriously slow pace, some teams are more laden in their roster with bigs or small men or guys with big wingspans on the wings. So is there a certain kind of team makeup that you think is more or less likely to regress?
Yeah, I mean, I think you certainly have to consider that. So Notre Dame is a pretty good example. Their 2-point defensive numbers look pretty similar to last year, probably a little bit better this year than last year.
Mm-hmm.
But their 3-point numbers are awful. They were okay last year, kind of commensurate with their 2-point field goal defense, and they're awful this year. So, you can look at the personnel. So last year they had Jarian Grant and Pat Connaughton, and those were 2 6'5" guys on the perimeter. So did losing those 2 guys affect their 3-point defense? And I think the answer is probably a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But does that mean they're going to be one of the worst 3-point defenses in the country? I don't think that's the case. So I really expect regression from the 39-40% that they're allowing right now. If we looked at them right before the tournament started, I bet we're going to see that drop to 38-37%.
Yeah, I have your list here of the top 25 unluckiest teams with regards to 3-point defense, and Notre Dame is number 3. Cal is number 2. Let me ask you another question: does pace matter, or do you think that pace is taken into consideration when you look at the 2-point defensive numbers?
Yeah, so pace absolutely matters, and in fact, you better have a good handle on pace if you're betting any kind of total this year. But my analysis is kind of independent of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually kind of think of, well, pace is one thing, and we really care about that for the total. And efficiency is supposed to efficiency. Any kind of efficiency number is supposed to account for pace. So anytime when you're looking at a shooting percentage, so you're taking shots made divided by shots attempted, that's something that's an efficiency type stat. So that pace shouldn't really affect that type of number.
All right, well, looking over your top 25 most unlucky teams so far, Cal is number 2 and Notre Dame number 3. And Cal is definitely a team that I have circled in my head as a team that I expect to do relatively well ATS going forward. Then I also see Wisconsin at number 5, UNC, interestingly, at number 9, and South Carolina at 11, Utah at 12, Cincinnati at 13. You would expect all those teams to probably be, undervalued going forward because of this, or do you think the market will take it into consideration and adjust?
I think the market does take it into consideration. Like, we can actually look at Cal, and I should mention these numbers don't include last night's games yet.
Mm-hmm.
So Cal was a team that was a 1.5-point favorite, which I think is maybe a little bit surprising because they were playing Oregon, a team that's been ranked.
I was all over Cal last night, first half and full game.
Excuse me?
I said I was all over Cal last night, first half and full game. I was surprised that it was that low.
Yeah, and the numbers really agree with you.
Yeah.
So I have some numbers that don't consider that 3-point defensive luck, and it called it pretty much a toss-up.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why you want to do this analysis, because you don't want to bet Oregon because of my number that doesn't consider that 3-point luck. The numbers actually suggested, that Cal was going to do all right. There was a pretty heavy swing in variance last night. Cal ended up winning by 20. Oregon shot horribly from 3-point range. That wasn't the only reason they got blown out, but that is certainly an example. I also think that North Carolina team is pretty interesting. This is a team that I've never really been high on. I actually almost gagged when I saw that they were first in the preseason AP poll. It's just not a team I see winning a national title, even though that's really the expectation this year.
Mm-hmm.
But now we kind of balance that with the fact that, well, maybe they've gotten a little unlucky on 3-point defense, and we really need to take these guys seriously.
Okay, let me ask you one question that kind of just occurred to me looking over these lists. Let's see if you have anything to say about it. The teams in the top 25 most unlucky teams on three-point defense are all teams from, or mostly teams from major conferences, Cal, Notre Dame, Wisconsin. Then I'm looking at the list from the top 25 teams that have been the luckiest with regards to three-point defense, and it's like the entire list is from very minor conferences. Number 1, Mississippi Valley State. NC Asheville is number 2. Prairie View A&M is number 3. Alabama A&M number 4. Then Citadel, Maine, Jacksonville State, Southeast Missouri State. They're all from more minor conferences. Why do you think that is? And do you think that's just a fluke, or is there something to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And if I were completely
noticed that
prepared
yourself,
for this
though?
call, I would have looked at last year's numbers
Right.
at this time of the year and try to make a comparison. But I don't know if that's a fluke or not. But I noticed that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's stark. It's stark.
It's very stark.
And on
Very
the on the top 25 most lucky teams, the only one that stands out to me is Kansas State at number 14. That is a big one. And
Right.
there's Houston at number 18. Everyone else, though, is from the minor conferences. But we might.
Right, exactly.
I'm
So
sorry?
here's one thing to consider about that.
Mhm.
I think this year there's much more parity in college basketball,
Right.
just with the one and done talent at the
Mhm.
top. And I've noticed that I think Villanova is the highest in my team rankings right now on my site. And there are at least 7 teams that ended up with a higher rating at the end of last season than where Villanova is at this point in the season. So is maybe part of that some of these top teams are getting unlucky, like the North Carolina? Maybe they're actually better and they should be first in the country based on this three-point defensive analysis. I think that is something, maybe that is the fact that we're seeing so much parity even in the numbers this year could be a result that the better teams are having pretty bad three-point defensive luck. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure, totally. All right, Ed. Well, thanks so much. Very interesting information. And Ed's article will be at Sportsbook Review in a bunch of places. Come to our sites, and you can find it there. Ed Feng's website is thepowerrank.com. Ed Feng, thanks so much, and I hope you join us again for future videos.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and I'd be happy to join anytime.